came to be.
Hmm.
And these ideas are also connected, of course, to the pseudepigrapha and the apocrypha of the Western canon, the Bible itself,
Right.
writings of the Hebrew sages. These all fit exactly what the Mayan and the Inca and the Aztec and the Toltec and all these groups were talking about. But not only that, you can go and open up your regular old King James Bible to Genesis 6 and find information that connects to the giants, the story of their creation of large cities, this idea that they actually had a civilization and they were in rule of it before they were destroyed. You can find that in the Old Testament, especially Genesis 6, where it's actually talking about the giants that were in the earth and that they had actually been the product of a breeding program by some extraterrestrial force, which, as Christian I believe, was angelic, but rebel angelic. They created the Nephilim, and Nephilim in Hebrew just means the fallen one. From that point, you can launch into all the other creation myths around the globe, about as far back as you can actually access them.
Right.
And they all have that salient point.
So
there was a destructive epic, but there is going to be another one that's coming.
So, David, what I want to ask you right there is that, do you think that this rebel force, obviously then led by Lucifer, if you will, that they came down to Earth and basically at that point set up the entire megalithic system of incredible monuments that we can see from all over the world? Because basically wherever we focus a little bit more on, we can see that we can find them in South America, in North America, we can find them in throughout Europe, in Asia, certainly in Africa as well, and Middle East, Baalbek, all of these incredible sites that have these, as you pointed out in many of your lectures, these incredible, trilitons. They weigh, immense, immense stone structures basically that they put together. Do you think that this have come from the same group of beings then that came from the outside?
This is one of the most fascinating points, I think, that you could have touched on, and that's the commonality of this origin of civilization, as it comes from the civilization myths of the greatest antiquity that we actually have resources of. I guess it's focusing on the idea of the name of these creatures to begin with.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest examples of an explanation of the descent of these things is the apocryphal book or the pseudepigraphic work of Enoch, which I guess is the book of Enoch.
Yeah.
And Enoch talks about what's translated into English as the Watchers, them coming down and actually breeding with daughters of Adam. And the actual writing for the Watcher is a word that would be pronounced more like ear or eerie in the Hebrew.
Really?
And the Semitic word is used all the time for these beings, ear. But if you look in the Old Testament, you can find that word written Ayin Resh in the Hebrew letters is also used in exact the same form as the word for city, ear. So the first time you actually read of where Enoch builds a city, or not Enoch, but Cain, the first man who ever builds a city, who is Cain, it talks about the city being called an ear. If you read in the book of Enoch about the Watchers, they're called ear. Ear is actually the Greek root for Ares, god of Mars, or even the place of Mars itself. It's an absolute connection when it comes to the etymology. And historically, if you look back far enough, you'll find that there's a connection between the worship of Mars and this idea of learning how to build and cause civilization to come into being, and this idea also of making war with other groups and Mars itself as a planet.
Yeah.
And jumping all the way to the future again, to the idea of when the end cataclysm comes, when this next cataclysm that eschatology looks forward to, of biblical prophecy, and to many New Age groups and all these ancient civilizations that have records looking, back into incredible antiquity. They always have a focus toward the future and the next cataclysm that's coming.
Yeah.
They talk about these watchers coming back also. And that's our focus now, amazingly, is again on Mars. And the UFO phenomena seems to be focused on the geometry that is around this whole manifestation of the megaliths, what we find on Mars, what we've actually found on Cydonia Mars, which my first book was about. That connection goes back and forth so many times that it's actually kind of overwhelming.
It is.
To get it all together and to set it out so that someone actually can see that the repetitions of the idea that Mars brought civilization into being on this Earth, and that somehow it will be resurrected again.
Yeah.
That we're not actually now at the peak of civilization. The ancients actually forward to a golden age or resurgence of a golden age through the agency of these beings that came once, were wiped off the planet, and are supposed to come back.
And David, when you were speaking about these rebel angels, watchers, or even the messengers, as you call them in one of your talks, you said that they can't avoid doing the symbolic things that they do anymore, that we can avoid following the law of gravity. And I think that's a really nice way to put it, because as you just mentioned, that the connections between all of these, symbolic communications, if you will, if we compare, if we look at the Mars-Earth connection, or if we look at some of the place names and so forth, it's just incredible. But I think that you've used a word for that, and I think you refer to it as theurgy. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit, and what it means, and why it is important to signify something like a place in time, and even the naming of the thing, if you will.
Yeah, the idea that these beings are so stuck when it comes to what it is they do, the repetition patterns that they actually do things in, is because their nature, what they were designed to do is just communicate. They're emissaries. They communicate from a higher level to a lower level. And not only that, they communicate in between themselves. And their very name just means messenger. Angelos in Greek, and Malachim, I guess, in Hebrew. Very same idea. The name just means messenger. That's their reason for being. And when they actually manifest through their activities now, it's completely a message. It's a complete thought, but it goes beyond what most humans think of as a communication, because they're not just left to our frame of reference. They have an extent that comes outside our temporal existence.
Right.
Which means that they can think forward into and actually interact with one moment in time, at one event at a time. They will still have events that connect to that they've foreseen many years ahead. And it also stands to reason that if it's at a higher level than human intellect, whenever an angel would interact on this plane of our existence, that there would be pure thought, which is mathematical and geometrical.
Yeah. So
that you can actually anticipate that sort of communication being conveyed whenever you see a UFO sighting, even something that seems mundane.
Right.
And especially something that is extraordinary, like, say, a recovery or encounters of the third or fourth, other encounters where you have mass sightings or UFO flaps.
Right.
You have to pay particular attention to when it happened, where it happened, the coordinates of where it happened, the number of objects. I mean, all these things are important because it's pure communication, and it's at a level that's far higher than you would anticipate from our perspective.
And David, would you say that it isn't until it also reaches the mainstream that this kind of communication becomes important. But because in many cases it seems to be that many, like let's say we look at a UFO sighting, for instance, then that can be something, you know, very hidden away, so to speak, and the mass media never touches upon it. But then once in a while you get these kind of large events, like let's say the Phoenix Light, or if I don't know if you've heard about it yet, David, but there's this very recent one just now that occurred, interestingly enough, now at the summer solstice, just yesterday, or you know, these cops were chasing a UFO over car